The Mason family dinner was always a grand affair, held in my uncle's sprawling mansion overlooking the city. Every month, the successful members of our family gathered to celebrate their achievements and remind me of my apparent failures. Tonight was no different, except that tomorrow everything would change. I adjusted my intentionally plain dress, a $50 bargain store find that perfectly maintained my carefully crafted image of the struggling secretary. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany dining table as my cousin Marcus held court, regaling everyone with tales of his latest corporate conquest. And just like that, we acquired their entire Pacific division, he boasted, swirling his expensive wine. Another billion-dollar deal for Mason Enterprises. My Aunt Evelyn beamed at her son with undisguised pride. That's my boy. Always knew you'd take the company to new heights. I took a small sip of water, hiding my smile behind the glass. If they only knew that the mysterious investment firm that had facilitated that acquisition was one of my shell companies. Speaking of careers, my Uncle Richard, CEO of Mason Enterprises, turned his attention to me. Sophia, you're still working as a secretary at... Where is it again? Wallace and Partners, I replied quietly, naming the mid-sized consulting firm where I maintained a small office. It was one of the hundreds of companies I secretly owned, though they thought it was just where I worked as a receptionist. Right, he nodded dismissively. You know, I could always find you an entry-level position at Mason Enterprises. It's not too late to start a real career. Marcus snickered. Come on, Dad. Sophie's been a secretary for what, 15 years now? Some people just aren't cut out for bigger things. I thought about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning where Mason Enterprises board would be gathering to discuss the company's future. They had no idea that through a complex web of investment vehicles and shell corporations, I had slowly acquired a controlling interest in their precious family business. I'm comfortable where I am, I said softly, playing my part perfectly. My cousin Amanda, Marcus's wife, gave me what she thought was a sympathetic look. You shouldn't settle, Sophia. Look at everyone else here, executives, directors, business owners. Don't you want more from life? I glanced around the table at my successful relatives. Uncle Richard, who inherited Mason Enterprises from my grandfather and nearly ran it into the ground before my hidden investments saved it. Marcus, who landed his VP position through pure nepotism. Amanda, who married into the family's success and never worked a day in her life. Then there was me, the black sheep. The one they all pitied. Poor Sophia, just a secretary at 35. If they only knew that my net worth exceeded their combined fortunes several times over. Speaking of the business, Uncle Richard continued, tomorrow's board meeting should be interesting. There's been some unusual stock movement lately. Someone's been quietly buying up shares through various investment firms. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Nothing to worry about, Dad. Probably just some hedge funds trying to make a quick profit. Nobody can challenge our family's control of Mason Enterprises. I thought about the documents sitting in my office safe, proof of ownership, voting rights, and the carefully planned strategy that would unfold tomorrow morning. 15 years of patient planning was about to pay off. More wine, Sophia, Amanda offered, clearly trying to change the subject to something she thought more appropriate for my simple understanding. No thank you, I replied. I have to work early tomorrow. This earned knowing looks around the table. Of course the secretary had to work early, probably making coffee and answering phones while they made the real decisions. You know, my Aunt Evelyn spoke up, unable to resist another dig. I saw Nancy Williams the other day. You remember her from high school? She's a senior executive at Goldman Sachs now. And here you are, still just a secretary. I finished for her, keeping my voice deliberately meek. Yes, I know. The conversation moved on to more important matters. Marcus's new yacht, Amanda's latest shopping spree in Paris, Uncle Richard's golf club membership. I sat quietly, playing my role while mentally reviewing tomorrow's strategy. They had no idea that Nancy Williams worked for me or that her position at Goldman Sachs was instrumental in helping me execute several key acquisitions. They didn't know that the hobby investment blog I supposedly read during my lunch breaks was actually one of the most influential financial newsletters in the country, or that my tiny apartment was just a front while I lived in a penthouse under a different name. As dinner wound down, Uncle Richard raised his glass. To Mason Enterprises, may our family's legacy continue to grow stronger. Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. I joined in, thinking about how that legacy would be completely transformed by this time tomorrow. "Don't forget to set your alarm, Sophia," Marcus called out as I prepared to leave. "Wouldn't want you to be late for making coffee." I smiled softly. "Don't worry, cousin. I wouldn't miss tomorrow morning for anything in the world." Driving home in my deliberately modest car, while my Bentley sat in a private garage across town, I reflected on the journey that had led to this moment. 15 years ago, when my father, Uncle Richard's younger brother, passed away, the family had made their true feelings clear. Despite my father being a founding partner of Mason Enterprises, Uncle Richard had maneuvered to buy out his shares for a fraction of their worth, taking advantage of our grief and my mother's lack of business knowledge. I was fresh out of business school, but they dismissed my objections, patting me on the head and telling me to leave the complex business matters to those who understood them. So I did exactly what they suggested. I took a job as a secretary at a small consulting firm. But what they didn't know was that I had inherited not just my father's business acumen, but also his foresight. Before his death, he had set up a trust in my name, with investments that would prove to be worth millions. I lived modestly, worked diligently, and invested wisely. One small company became 2, then 10, then 50. I built a network of shell corporations and investment vehicles, each operating independently but all leading back to me. I hired the best financial minds in the industry, many of whom have been overlooked or underestimated by companies like Mason Enterprises. My empire grew in the shadows while I maintained my facade as the struggling secretary. I watched as Uncle Richard made mistake after mistake, as Marcus's arrogance led to costly blunders, as the company my father had helped build began to falter under their leadership. Through my various shell companies, I began buying Mason Enterprises stock, always staying just under the reporting thresholds, using different investment vehicles to avoid detection. When the company needed emergency capital during the financial crisis, I provided it through one of my firms, gaining convertible debt that would prove crucial in tomorrow's power play. Arriving at my real home, a stunning penthouse with views of the entire city, I changed out of my bargain store dress into comfortable designer loungewear. My assistant, Sarah, was waiting with updates. "Everything's set for tomorrow," she reported. "The board members have all been briefed privately. Legal has triple-checked all the documentation. The press release is ready to go." I nodded, pouring myself a glass of the same expensive wine my cousins had been drinking, but from a much better vintage. "And the voting rights?" "Confirmed. With the conversion of the debentures and the shares held by our various entities, we control 51.3% of the voting rights. There's nothing they can do to stop it." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was probably still celebrating their imagined successes, blissfully unaware that their world was about to turn upside down. "Sarah," I said, "make sure the photographer is ready tomorrow. I want to capture their faces when they realize that poor Sophia, just a secretary, is actually their new boss. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed." The thought brought a smile to my face as I sipped my wine, watching the city sparkle below. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with an acquisition notice and a change in management letterhead. Part 1 ends here, leading into the dramatic confrontation and reveal that will unfold in Part 2. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? The morning of the board meeting dawned bright and clear. I stood in my penthouse dressing room, transforming myself from the meek secretary my family knew into the CEO I truly was. Gone was the bargain store dress, replaced by a tailored Armani suit. My carefully maintained mousy hairstyle was now elegantly styled, and the minimal makeup I usually wore gave way to subtle but striking sophistication. Sarah appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "The first board members have arrived. Your uncle and cousin are in the conference room, apparently discussing strategies to deal with the hostile investor." I smiled at my reflection. If they only knew. "Is everything else ready?" "Security has been briefed. The documentation is in place. Legal team is standing by." She paused, then added with a slight smirk, "And a photographer is positioned to capture every moment." The Mason Enterprises headquarters occupied a prestigious building downtown. I'd been here countless times, always through the side entrance, always with my head down, playing the role of the insignificant secretary. Today, I entered through the private executive elevator, my heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see my family members gathered around the table. Uncle Richard stood at the head, his face red as he gesticulated wildly. Marcus sat nearby, his usual smug expression replaced by concern. The other board members, carefully selected by my shell companies over the years, maintained neutral expressions, knowing what was about to unfold. I checked my watch. 8:59 a.m., time for the show to begin. The room fell silent as I walked in, my uncle freezing mid-sentence. For a moment, no one spoke. They were trying to reconcile the powerful woman before them with the mousy secretary they thought they knew. Sophia? Marcus finally managed, his voice caught between confusion and dismissal. What are you doing here? This is a private board meeting. I walked calmly to the head of the table. I know exactly what this is, cousin. Please, everyone, take your seats. Uncle Richard's face darkened. Now see here, young lady. I don't know what game you're playing, but this is a serious business matter. The secretary's office is down the hall. Richard, I said coolly, using his first name for the first time in my life, I suggest you sit down. You'll want to be sitting for what comes next. Something in my tone made him hesitate. Before he could respond, Sarah entered with a team of lawyers, distributing thick folders to each board member. What you're looking at, I continued, my voice carrying easily across the now silent room, is documentation proving that through various investment vehicles and shell corporations, I now control 51.3% of Mason Enterprises' voting shares. The color drained from Uncle Richard's face as he frantically flipped through the papers. Marcus grabbed his copy, his hands shaking slightly. This is impossible, he sputtered. These companies, Phoenix Holdings, Sterling Investments, Global Venture Partners, they're all different entities. All ultimately owned by me, I replied calmly. Just like Wallace and Partners, where you thought I was just a secretary. Just like the investment firm that helped you acquire the Pacific Division last month. Just like the emergency creditors who saved this company during the financial crisis. Uncle Richard collapsed into his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. But how? While you were busy mocking my career choices, I was building an empire. Every time you dismissed me as just a secretary, I was acquiring another company. While you bragged about your business acumen at family dinners, I was orchestrating deals you never even knew existed. I pressed a button, and the screen behind me lit up with a corporate structure chart, showing the vast network of companies I controlled. Mason Enterprises was now just one small part of a much larger constellation. Remember Nancy Williams? I asked, enjoying the shock on their faces. The one Aunt Evelyn loves to compare me to? She's been working for me for the past 5 years. That Pacific Division deal you're so proud of, Marcus? I arranged it through 3 different shell companies. Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. This is a trick, some kind of joke. I assure you it's not. I nodded to Sarah, who distributed another set of documents. These are the immediate changes to the corporate structure. Richard, you'll be announcing your retirement this afternoon. Marcus, your position as VP is being eliminated. The board has already approved these changes. Isn't that right, ladies and gentlemen? The other board members nodded solemnly. They had all been carefully chosen over the years, many of them placed there by my various investment vehicles. You can't do this, Uncle Richard wheezed. This company, our family legacy. The legacy you stole from my father. I cut in sharply. The shares you manipulated my mother into selling after his death, that legacy? The room fell silent again. Even Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. 15 years ago, you told me to leave the complex business matters to those who understood them. So I did exactly that. I just didn't tell you that I was the one who understood them better than anyone else. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. The press release announcing the changes will go out at noon. You have until then to clear out your offices. Security will assist you. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Uncle Richard looked at them, then back at me, his empire crumbling before his eyes. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why maintain the pretense all these years? I smiled, thinking of all the family dinners, all the condescending remarks, all the dismissive looks. Because you taught me the most valuable lesson in business, Uncle Richard. Never let anyone know your true worth until it's too late for them to stop you. As they were led out of the conference room, I heard Marcus mutter, just a secretary. All this time, she was just a secretary. Sarah approached with a tablet showing the first photos from the meeting. The moment of realization on their faces was perfectly captured: the shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror of understanding just how thoroughly they had underestimated me. "Should I send these to the family group chat?" she asked with a slight smile. "No," I replied, settling into what had been Uncle Richard's chair for the past 20 years. "Save them for the next family dinner. I have a feeling the seating arrangement will be quite different from now on." Over the next few weeks, the business world buzzed with the story of how an unknown businesswoman had built a secret empire while posing as a secretary. The financial press dubbed it the stealth takeover of the decade. Profiles were written, analyzing how I had maintained my cover for so long while assembling my business constellation. The family dynamics shifted dramatically. Aunt Evelyn stopped hosting her monthly dinners. Marcus and Amanda suddenly became very busy whenever family gatherings were mentioned. Uncle Richard was reportedly looking at houses in Florida, as far from the corporate world as he could get. But the most satisfying moment came 3 months later, when I hosted my first family dinner as the openly acknowledged CEO of both Mason Enterprises and my larger business empire. The same dining room that had witnessed years of subtle humiliation now saw a very different scene. I sat at the head of the table, wearing one of my real designer dresses. The relatives who had once dismissed me now waited nervously for acknowledgement, their previous confidence replaced by eager sycophancy. "More wine, Sophia," Amanda offered, her former condescension replaced by anxious deference. "No, thank you," I replied, signing off on a multi-million-dollar deal on my tablet. "Some of us have real work to do." Marcus winced at the intentional echo of his own past mockery. He had recently applied for a mid-level position at one of my smaller companies. His resume was sitting in my pending tray, gathering dust. "You know," I said, addressing the table at large, "I was thinking about what you all said about my career choices." I paused, enjoying their uncomfortable shifts in their seats. "You were right. I definitely shouldn't have settled for being just a secretary." I raised my glass, remembering all the times they had toasted their own success while ignoring me. To new beginnings and to seeing people for who they truly are. They raised their glasses weakly, the crystal catching the light just as it had on so many previous evenings. But now the light illuminated very different expressions. Humbled, uncertain, finally understanding that they had never really known me at all. Later that night, in my office overlooking the city, I opened the safe and took out an old photograph. It showed my father standing in front of the original Mason Enterprises building, young and proud and full of dreams. Next to it, I placed a new photo, the one of my uncle and cousin realizing who really controlled their company. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "Sometimes the best way to win isn't to fight the battle they expect, but to win the war they don't even know they're fighting." I closed the safe and walked to the window. The city sparkled below, each light representing another opportunity, another potential addition to my empire. But now I didn't have to hide anymore. Now everyone knew what I had known all along, that success doesn't always wear the face people expect, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one they never bothered to notice at all.